Hi there everybody, welcome to the corner, and if this is not your first visit then welcome back. Today we are looking at the Amiga 600 once again. I have finally got hold of a floppy drive for it, or at least I've had a floppy drive for it for a few months now and I've finally got around to doing something about it. So today we are going to be fitting the floppy drive, and we're also going to be fitting a compact flash card and compact flash adapter and a copy of Amiga DOS 3.2. So let's get to it. Okay, I've got the case apart, and since it's a nice day outside, I've taken the top part outside and left it in the sun. So hopefully that will do a little bit of natural retro brighting. It is a Chinon FZ354. It should all work, hopefully. It's sure to be simply a matter of fitting it. And screws at the back screw into the drive and hold it in place. Signal and power. And it just slots into there. It does worry me that it's so close to the ground there. But that's how it fits. That's perfectly lined up. But I am going to put some plastic underneath it just as insurance, because we don't want it to go bang by mistake. And the keyboard goes into the keyboard hole. I'll turn it around so I can actually see what I'm doing. There we go. And now we can connect it up to the power and stick a workbench disk in and see if it will start. Right, it's plugged in. I've got a workbench disk here, workbench 2, but we won't worry about that. So power, monitor, mouse. Let's switch it on and see what happens. That shows us we have got 2.0 ROMs. And it's looking for a disk. I can hear it ticking. So floppy light. And that looks like a good boot. I'm not going to worry about taking it all the way. Mouse is working, yes, good. So that's the power, that's the floppy, that's going to be the hard disk. Now I've got a choice of two compact flash adapters. There's this one, which is a direct plug into the board. Donk like that. And there's this one, which is in a sealed bag, if you can see it, which has got an edge connector that way, and that plugs in via a ribbon cable. So the ribbon cable would go into here and then into here. I'm inclined to try this one simply because it means less faffy about. We will have to take off the bracket. Okay, let's power the Amiga down. Unplug it for safety. So this should just plug straight in. And into that we will plug an SD card. And that, in one sense, is that. However, this is an unformatted disk, and I very much doubt that it's going to work. Now, I think there are two things that we can do. One is we can plug this into our Amiga OS 3.2 install in WinUAE, and we can format it in WinUAE and basically do it all in that, and then just plug it in and it will work. That's kind of boring. What I would like to try and do is install that in situ like we did in the old days. I'm not sure if we can, and we might actually need to burn Amiga OS 3.2 ROMs. In fact, we will need to burn Amiga OS 3.2 ROMs. So let's do that. You can tell I don't really think out these things before I come and start. So I'm going to go away and figure out what is the best way to install Amiga OS on that, and then I'll come back and do it. Okay, so I've got the ROM, and I've got a label for the ROM, but I'm not putting the label on yet because I want to test it first. So the first thing that we're going to do is put the new EPROM into the machine. So let's remove the keyboard, put my anti-static on, and take the ROM chip out. This is the old ROM. Now notice we have two empty pins at that end. So that's out, and that's in. Let's switch it on and see what happens. Okay, well, it actually booted. I rather wanted to see the Kickstart screen. So let's turn it off and try that again. This time I'm going to take the floppy out of the floppy drive because we're running Workbench 2.04, and I've got a Gotek plugged in which has got all the 3.2 install floppies on it. So what I'm going to do is turn that off, and now we should have a completely vanilla 3.2 OS Amiga which will boot to a Workbench screen, or at least an insert Workbench disk screen, I hope. There we go, 3.2 ROM Kickstart 47.96. Copyright 2021. That is what I wanted to see. So now the intention is to try and install Workbench 3.2 on this compact flash drive, pretending to be an IDE hard drive. And I'm intending to do it entirely in machine. I don't know if this compact flash drive is already formatted. I don't know if it needs to be formatted. Probably FAT32 if it is. I'm trying and hoping to do everything in machine exactly how it would have been done in 1992 or 87 or 89 or whenever. So switch it on. In those days we would have had floppy drives and floppies, but today I've got everything as ADF files on this Gotek. The end result is the same. I could just take the Gotek and burn floppies from it, but that would just take longer. This way they are at least virtual floppies, and it is behaving exactly like a floppy drive, to the extent that I can see on the display exactly which track and sector it's reading. Ah, here we go. I don't have any instructions, so I'm going purely by guesswork. I figure this needs to set up the compact flash, which is probably going to, yeah. Scuzzior XT. I have no clue. Define a new drive type, 21 megabytes. I don't know that I want that. Read configuration, let's see what that does. This will read as much data as possible from the drive. Heads times blah blah blah, usually equals blocks per cylinder, but not always. Oh, so manufacturer Transcend, and that's correct. The drive name is D, drive revision 2008, 4 gigabytes. Okay, I guess. Right, so there it is. Partition hard drive is what we want to do. Now that's giving us 2 partitions of 2 gigabytes each. I don't know that we want to do that, do we? That seems to be as close as I can get. What does advanced options do? Ah. What shall we call it? DH1. No, I'll leave it as that and call this DH2. Okay. Save changes to drive, I guess. Low level format. Well, I suppose that's done. Save changes to drive. That's going to reboot, and we'll come back when it's rebooted. Okay, now to boot from the Gotek, we are going to need to hold down Control Amiga once we switch the machine on. Otherwise it's going to try and boot from the hard drive, which does not have anything on it, and so it will fail. Okay, I missed a step. It said hold down both mouse buttons. So let's do it again. Power on and both mouse buttons. Doesn't say how long you have to hold them down. Ah, there we go. Boot options. TF1. I didn't say DF0, I said DF1, you silly machine. Okay, I have reformatted this as straightforward FAT32, so when we turn it back on, it should basically try and find something to boot from. Won't boot from that, won't boot from that, it will boot from the GoTech. So let's see what happens. There's a little red light on that, I hadn't noticed before. So the GoTech is alive and it's reading. Right, install 32. Rather than going through HD tools, I'm just going to click on install and see if that does anything. Right, English British, because it is the one true English. Please insert volume locale. This is a stock Amiga 600 and it can't even install its own operating system. Okay, about a week has passed and I have got this little board, and what this is a RAM expansion. That's just a header for a real-time clock, which we don't have and I'm not worried about. So this goes, and according to that, this side down, this goes into the expansion port. So let's move the keyboard out of the way and plug this in. There we go. So this hopefully now should give us 2 megs of chip RAM, I think, which should be enough to install Workbench onto this hard drive, or compact flash card rather. So let's plug the power in and switch it on. Now the hard drive light comes on and stays on. This is a known problem with some of these modern adapters. Install 3.2, it's basically because this provides 3.3 volts to the LEDs and the LEDs need 5 volts and they're active low, so basically we need to put a resistor in there and that should sort it out. We'll look at that later on, assuming that we actually do get this installed. Okay, there we go. So install 3.2, 1.6 megabytes of graphics memory free. So let's see how far we get. If you remember, this was as far as we got last time. Right, this program lets you install Amiga release 3.2 onto a hard drive and also deploy several associated optionals. Do we want to install glow icons? I guess we could do that another time. Let's go for intermediate user because nobody ever wants to be thought of as a novice. Okay, we need to at least partition the disk, I think, if not format it. Right, so let's go back and do that. We learn by doing. HD tools. So transcend SD card, and that's correct. We want to partition the drive. So this is a 4 gig drive and it's going to give us two 2 gig partitions. I think that is fine. So we have two THD1 and THD0. Okay. Oh no, it's died. Okay, take 2. The last time it crashed while we were partitioning the hard drive. So we will see what we have got when we switch it on. Install 3.2 is on there. The floppy is empty. I do know the floppy drive works. Now this has the boot priority set so that it should always boot from the floppy, regardless of what is in here. But we will see. Right, so that's not coming up as anything. Okay, we will leave it as the default. Okay, I've played around with this quite a bit off camera and I think I'm getting somewhere. So I've managed to get TDH0 and TDH1, the two partitions, to actually show up. And the way that I did this was to partition it using the HD Setup 3.2 disk rather than the 3.2 install disk. It seems to call the 3.2 install disk anyway, but I'm not going to do this again. I'll just show you it coming up. I'm not going to do it again because it took me long enough to get it to work. So this lets us partition the hard drive, and it just seems to be, a different way into the same utility, but I can't be sure of that. Anyway, this way worked, whereas the other ways came up with a guru error and crashed the machine. So with this one, when it rebooted at the end of the partitioning and low-level format, it came up and said, this is not a DOS disk and would not boot. It would not boot. It just said, error, 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 error. This is not a DOS disk. And what I had to do was go into the boot menu, which you go do by holding both mouse buttons down when you reboot the machine, and specifically booting off DF1, which is the Gotek. And that then brought us back up to this window here, which is where we are now, and we have the two partitions that have come up, which are not formatted. They're low-level formatted, but they're not high-level formatted. And so now we're going to format this one. I'm not sure that I want to format both of them, but let's format this one to start with. And this is simply going to be the regular Workbench format disk, and I'm going to call it, what shall I call it? Workbench 3.2. And I think we need to long format this. It's going to ask me and ask me and ask me. And this is going to take a while, so we will come back when it's done. That took about 4 hours, and of course it finished overnight. So I'm going to reboot. Boot menu, right. Boot options, we are not going to disable anything, but we're just going to boot from DF1. Use boot. Okay, so we have Workbench install 3.2, Workbench 3.2, this is our compact flash. We've not initialized TDH1 because that's going to take another 4 hours. Yada yada yada. Do we want it installed on the Workbench 3.2 partition? Yes. English. We'll have all those printers. We'll have all those key maps. We won't have glow maps. Well, there we are, it's done. So, proceed. This should hopefully boot directly from the flash drive. There we go, look at that. Short fat squat clock. The date of course is totally wrong. We do not at the moment have a real-time clock in this machine, or a battery backed clock rather. That's possibly something for another time. We're in PAL high-res 640 by 256. Let's see what that looks like. Test. Oh yeah, that works, but you would not want to watch that for any amount of time. Now some sort of flicker fixer, or maybe an HDMI output thingy would sort that out. One thing that is for a future expansion, I have got a Raspberry Pi 3 Model A, and this would be ideal for a PiStorm. So that's possible for a future time. Unfortunately, PiStorms are out of stock, so we're not going to get one immediately. That has used up nearly a megabyte of memory. That is interesting. A lot of that is going to be this disk. So it's possibly a good job that we haven't put this other disk in, because that would use up quite a lot more memory. Experimentation is going to be required. Different block sizes and things will reduce the amount of memory taken up at the cost of the amount of space that is available on the disk. Let's quickly address a couple of issues. First off, we've got a label to stick onto the Kickstart ROM, so let's do that. Let's just trim it down to size. Peel the backing off. And stick that over the ROM. There we are. We know now exactly what that is. Kickstart 3.2.2, or is it just 3.2? Kickstart 3.2, whatever. I may have got that wrong, but it is stuck on there. And the other thing I want to address is this LED light. Now there's not very much information about this on the internet, but what I have discovered essentially from watching a Jan Beta video in which he fixes basically this same problem. The problem is caused by basically these cards, these modern cards, being 3.3 volt logic, whereas the Amiga is looking for 5 volt logic. And these LEDs come on by the signal being low, i.e. going to 0 volts. And anything that is low is interpreted as on. So anything that is high is interpreted as off. And for the Amiga, high means 5 volts. But for the compact flash card, high means 3.3 volts. And so its high is actually interpreted by the Amiga as not being high enough, and so therefore it is low, and so therefore the LED is on. Now the LED signal comes from pin 39, which on this is pin 1 down here. Pin 39 is this one here. And there is a trace that goes from this pin to this point here on this, I'm guessing some sort of transistory thing. There are two solutions to this that have been presented in various internet postings, and I'll put links to these in the description. Basically they came from, or at least I got them from Jan Beta's video, and one of them is to put a resistor between here and here and cutting this trace of about 20k, and that supposedly fixes the problem. The other one is for a sort of MOSFET thingy to be wrapped around a number of points which I'm not entirely sure whether are on this board, because this board does not have an activity LED on the board, it only has the power LED, and that's the power LED there. I imagine this transistor controls the activity and this one controls the power, but I can't be entirely sure. And the solution that Jan Beta used was a different one entirely, which basically involved putting a little board in between the header on the main PCB and this header here. And unfortunately that probably won't work, because this is a different design of board. This is designed to plug straight in, whereas other boards are designed to plug into a ribbon cable. So I think I'm going to try the resistor solution. Okay, and then we will basically just check that this is connected to what I think it is. Set it to beeping mode. And we are connected from here to here. There we go. So what we have to do is cut that little trace there and put a resistor between that point and that point. Okay, so let's take our knife and cut the trace. That looks cut, but let's just measure it. Yep, it's definitely cut. So now 20k resistor. That is on. Okay, if this works I can then clean it up and put some heat shrink tubing on it just to insulate it. Let's bring back the Amiga. Okay, so plug this back in. I'm going to use the end of the screwdriver to push it down because those pins are sharp. Power video. There it is. And mouse. Now let's turn it on and see what happens. Well, that did not make a difference. It's less bright. And the Amiga is still booting. But that did not fix the problem, so I am going to basically put that back the way it was. And I guess we'll have to live with it. Or use a different... Maybe we'll come back to that another time. So all I'm going to do now is put this back together, put the case back on, screw it all in. I tried all the solutions that were posted with this adapter, from the resistor to putting diodes in series to putting this little MOSFET on, and either the activity light stayed on constantly, or it just went dim, or it stayed off constantly. So the only thing that I have managed to do to get the activity light working is to put this alternate adapter on that has the little ribbon cable, and as you will see, this is working. So here comes the activity light, LEDs. So unfortunately the nice neat little plug straight into the board solution doesn't seem to work, but the traditional ribbon cable is working fine. So I think I'm going to go with that. All that remains is to put this machine back together, put the lid on, screw it together, and that is done. PyStorm next, but that is for another time. So thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. We're getting very close to 1,000 subscribers, so your subscription will be very, very welcome. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time. See ya.